The affair from my youth that destroyed my family. They say the past is a foreign country, a place you can't really return to, but one that always leaves its stamp on you. For years, I believed I had outrun mine. I built a new home, a career, a family. I wore respectability like a well-fitted coat. And yet, no matter how far I went, the echoes of a single summer still followed me. I was 19 then. Young, restless, hungry for something I couldn't even name. One choice, just one affair. A secret too heavy for a girl to carry set in motion a chain of events that fractured my family and haunted me for decades. Now, in the quiet evenings of my 40s, when my children sleep and my husband's steady breathing fills the room, I sometimes close my eyes and feel that summer again. The heat shimmering off asphalt. The reckless laughter of a boy I thought I loved. The sharp taste of betrayal when everything fell apart. This is not an easy story to tell. It's not clean, or pretty, or noble. It's about mistakes that leave scars on everyone around you. But it's mine. And if you're willing to listen, I'll take you back to the beginning. Chapter 1. The Summer That Changed Everything. The year was 1998. The world felt bigger then. But in my hometown of Willow Creek, life was small, predictable. Summers followed the same rhythm. Kids racing bikes down the cul-de-sacs, church bells on Sundays, fireworks over the lake in July. My parents' house sat on a quiet street where hedges were trimmed with care, neighbors waved at each other from driveways, and nothing truly scandalous ever seemed to happen. At least, that's what I thought. I had just finished my first year at a university 2 hours away. I came home that summer with my textbooks still smelling faintly of dorm rooms and coffee, my heart restless in ways I didn't yet understand. My parents, William and Martha, greeted me with pride. My father, a lawyer, loved telling anyone who'd listen that his daughter was college material. My mother, a school teacher, fussed over me endlessly, as if I had returned from war instead of a semester of late-night study sessions and cafeteria food. On the surface, I was their perfect child. A clean transcript, polite manners, the kind of girl people pointed to as a good example. But inside, I was restless. I craved something beyond the walls of that house, something beyond the rhythm of small-town life. And that's when I saw him. The first time was at the construction site near the town square. The library was being expanded, and I'd wander past on my way to the bakery or the post office. Among the workers in hard hats and dusty jeans, one man stood out, taller than the rest, with sunburnt skin, hair the color of wheat, and a crooked grin that seemed to flash just for me. He looked older than me, maybe mid-20s, but not so much older that I couldn't imagine talking to him. I remember slowing my pace, pretending to check the bulletin board outside the grocery store, just so I could steal another glance. He noticed. He caught my eye, tipped his cap in a lazy, confident gesture, and I felt a spark shoot through me that I had never felt before. His name, I would later learn, was Daniel Hayes. At 19, you don't yet understand how dangerous a smile can be. That summer stretched long and hot. Days melted into each other, lazy mornings on the porch, afternoons reading novels in the shade, evenings with friends at the diner. But after seeing Daniel once, I began to notice him everywhere. At the gas station, wiping his hands on a rag. At the hardware store, loading lumber into the back of his old Chevy truck. At the fairgrounds, leaning against a fence with a soda bottle dangling from his fingers. And every time, his eyes would find mine. A quick spark. A silent invitation. I told myself it was harmless. Just looks. Just curiosity. But one night, the summer fair rolled into town, bringing with it neon lights, cotton candy, and the smell of fried dough. My friends and I wandered among the rides, laughing as the Ferris wheel turned against the dusk sky. That's when I saw him again, Daniel leaning against the railing, watching me. Our eyes locked. I felt my pulse quicken. My friends tugged me toward the carousel, but I hung back, caught in his gaze. And then, in the chaos of flashing lights and music, he moved closer. "You look like you're not from around here," he said, his voice low, teasing. "I am," I replied, almost defensively. "Born and raised." He grinned. "Funny. You don't seem like it. You've got a city look in your eyes." I laughed, though I didn't know what he meant. "And what about you?" "Just passing through," he said. "Working here for a while." We talked in snatches, the sounds of the fair buzzing around us. He was easy with words, charming in a way that made me feel older than I was. At one point, he leaned down, close enough that I could smell sawdust and cologne on his shirt, and whispered, "Meet me behind the Ferris wheel in 10 minutes." I should have said no. Instead, I nodded. That was the first night I kissed Daniel Hayes. It was clumsy at first, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. His lips were rough, insistent, and when he pulled me close, the world tilted. For a moment, the rides, the noise, the people, all of it vanished. It was just him and me, hidden in the shadows of the fair. When I returned to my friends, my lips still tingled. I told them nothing. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the kiss over and over until sleep finally claimed me. Somewhere deep down, I knew I had crossed an invisible line. But instead of fear, all I felt was exhilaration. The summer had just begun, and with Daniel in it, nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 2. The Secret Nights. The kiss behind the Ferris wheel wasn't supposed to mean anything. At least, that's what I told myself the next morning as I helped my mother fold laundry in the warm kitchen. The scent of detergent clung to my hands. The steady hum of the washer filled the silence. And yet, inside, my chest was buzzing with the memory of Daniel's lips. I replayed it again and again, his grin, the way his hand brushed against mine, the electric shock of doing something forbidden. It was reckless. It was wrong. But it was also intoxicating. And once you taste something like that, it's impossible to go back to who you were before. The second meeting 2 days later, I saw him again. I had convinced myself to avoid the town square. But fate, or maybe just teenage defiance, led me straight there anyway. He was leaning against his Chevy, shirt sleeves rolled up, forearms streaked with dust. When he spotted me, his grin spread slowly, deliberately, as if he'd known all along I would come. "You took your time," he said. "I wasn't planning to," I answered, though my voice lacked conviction. He tilted his head. "But you did." There was no point denying it. Something about him drew me like a moth to a flame, even though every instinct whispered that flames burn. That afternoon, he drove me out of town. We passed rolling fields and barns until the roads grew empty. He pulled into a small diner, the kind with faded booths and a jukebox that still played Elvis songs. We talked for hours. Or maybe we just circled each other with words, both knowing that what we really wanted couldn't be spoken outright. At one point, he reached across the table and brushed his fingers over mine. The touch was light, but it sent a current up my arm. "You're too young for me," he said, though his voice carried no regret. "Then stop," I whispered. He leaned closer. "Do you want me to?" I didn't answer, and, in my silence, he found permission. The ritual after that, our meetings became secret rituals. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when my parents believed I was studying at the library, I'd slip into Daniel's truck. We'd drive far beyond Willow Creek, into towns where no one knew our names. Motels with flickering neon signs. Country roads where stars spilled across the sky. In those stolen hours, the world felt infinite. He told me stories about traveling, about places he'd seen, about dreams that seemed bigger than the life I knew. He said I made him feel alive again. I said nothing, just listened, soaking in every word. Sometimes, we didn't even talk. We just existed together in the hush of a cheap motel room, in the quiet rhythm of our breathing, in the reckless promise that none of it would matter as long as no one knew. But secrets have weight, and the longer you carry them, the heavier they become. The close calls one night, he dropped me off 2 blocks from my house. The headlights swept across the street just as my neighbor, Mrs. Langley, stepped onto her porch. She squinted, frowning, and I ducked low in the seat until Daniel whispered, "Relax. She can't see you." But my heart thudded painfully as I crept home, praying no one would notice the flush on my cheeks or the smell of his cologne lingering on my shirt. Another time, at the diner on the edge of town, one of my old classmates walked in. I panicked, but Daniel remained calm, his hand resting casually on mine under the table. "If you act like you're guilty," he murmured, "they'll know. If you act like you belong, no one questions it." It worked. My classmate waved, uninterested, and walked on. But inside, I knew how fragile our illusion really was. The warnings one ignored. My best friend, Rachel, noticed the change in me. "You're distracted," she said one evening as we sat on her porch drinking sodas. "You don't laugh the same anymore. You've got that secretive look. What's going on?" "Nothing," I lied, forcing a smile. She narrowed her eyes. "Is it a guy?" The pause before I answered gave me away. "Anna," she hissed. "Who?" "Don't tell me it's someone older." I shook my head quickly, but the heat rising in my cheeks betrayed me. Rachel grabbed my wrist. "Be careful, please. You don't know what you're playing with." I brushed her off, pretending her worry was unnecessary, but her words lingered. Because deep down, I knew she was right. The pull of desire. And yet, no matter how many doubts whispered inside me, Daniel's pull was stronger. He had a way of making me feel like the only person in the world. Like I wasn't just a teenager fumbling through life, but someone special, someone worth breaking rules for. One evening, as we lay in the back of his truck under a sky thick with stars, he turned to me and said, "You have no idea what you do to me." My breath caught. I should have felt afraid. Instead, I felt powerful. I told myself it was love. That word justified everything: the lies, the sneaking, the betrayals waiting to unravel. But love built on secrecy isn't love. It's hunger. And hunger always ends in ruin. The promise: by late July, our affair had become impossible to hide, at least from myself. Every morning, I woke with a rush of anticipation. When will I see him again? Every evening, I fell asleep clutching the memory of his touch. One night, as we sat in his truck watching fireflies dance across the fields, Daniel turned to me and said, "I'm not going to be here forever. Jobs move. Life moves. But if you want me, I'll stay." The words filled me with a wild hope. The idea that he would choose me, stay for me, was intoxicating. I clung to that promise as though it were a lifeline. What I didn't know then was that lifelines can strangle, too. The shadow of guilt at home, I grew keter. My mother asked if something was wrong, if I was sick. My father eyed me suspiciously when I skipped family dinners. I brushed them off, but guilt began to seep through the cracks. Every time I lied, I felt it settle deeper into my bones. Still, I couldn't stop. Because when you're 19 and you've tasted forbidden fruit, you convince yourself the sweetness is worth any consequence. I thought I could handle it. I thought no one would ever know. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially truths that burn. That summer night behind the Ferris wheel had been the spark. But by August, the fire was raging. And I, blinded by desire, didn't yet see that it was about to consume everything I loved. Chapter 3. The Truth I Refused to See By. August, the heat hung heavy over Willow Creek, pressing down on everything like a blanket you couldn't escape from. The cicadas buzzed in the trees, sprinklers hissed across lawns, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and gasoline. On the surface, life in town looked the same. Families shopped for school supplies, neighbors chatted over fences, church ladies planned their annual bake sale. But inside me, everything had shifted. Every day revolved around Daniel when I'd see him, how long we'd have, what lie I'd tell to cover my absence. I thought I was in control. I thought the world was blind. But truth doesn't stay hidden. It waits for the perfect moment to reveal itself, usually the moment that destroys you. The first crack it happened at a diner 2 towns over. Daniel and I sat in a corner booth, my legs pressed against his under the table. The jukebox played some old country tune, the kind of song that should have sounded sweet but only made me nervous. I was sipping a milkshake when the bell over the door jingled. Daniel stiffened. His hand, which had been tracing lazy circles on mine, froze. I followed his gaze and saw her. A woman in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, walked in. Tall, elegant. Her hair swept into a neat chignon, her dress simple but sophisticated. She looked out of place in that greasy diner. Her eyes scanned the room. Then they landed on us. On me. On him. The silence stretched like wire pulled too tight. Daniel's face drained of color. The woman didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't cause a scene. She simply looked at me, her eyes sharp, cold, full of a kind of knowledge that made my stomach drop, and then turned and walked out. I stared after her, my milkshake suddenly sour on my tongue. "Who was that?" I whispered. Daniel's jaw clenched. "No one." "Don't lie to me," I pressed, my voice trembling. "Who was she?" He scrubbed a hand over his face. "My wife." The word hit me like a slap, the spiral the world spun. Wife. He had a wife. A real woman. Not a girlfriend from long ago, not a story of someone he once loved. She was here. Flesh and blood. Married to him. I pulled my hand away, bile rising in my throat. "You're married? You never said. You never asked." He shot back, too quickly. "That's not fair." My voice cracked in the middle, drawing glances from nearby tables. I lowered it, whispering harshly. "You made me think." He leaned in, his voice low and desperate. "It doesn't matter. She doesn't matter. I'm leaving her. I was going to tell you." But his words rang hollow. My ears buzzed with the memory of that woman's stare, the way she hadn't needed to speak, because everything was written in her eyes. Still, part of me clung to him, desperate to believe. I wanted to think I was different. Special. Worth it. "Promise me," I whispered. "Promise you're leaving her." His eyes softened, and he took my hand again. "I promise, you're the one I want. Just give me time." And like a fool, I believed him. The walls closing in after that. Guilt became a shadow that followed me everywhere. At home, my mother asked why I was so pale, why I barely ate. My father eyed me with suspicion when I slipped out for study sessions that stretched into the night. Even Rachel, my best friend, wouldn't let it go. "You're hiding something," she accused one afternoon as we sat on the porch swing. "And it's going to blow up in your face." I laughed it off, but the sound was hollow. Everywhere I went, I felt the weight of unseen eyes. Every lie I told sounded louder in my head. And yet, I couldn't stop. Daniel's promises chained me tighter than any truth could. The confrontation. The explosion came faster than I expected. It was a Sunday evening. My parents and I had just finished dinner when the doorbell rang. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it. A moment later, her voice called, tight and trembling, "Anna, someone's here for you." I stepped into the hallway and froze. It was her, the woman from the diner. Claire. She stood tall, her posture composed, her expression controlled. But her eyes, those eyes burned with fury and sorrow all at once. Behind me, my father appeared, his brows knitting. "What's going on here?" Claire's gaze didn't waver. "Ask your daughter," she said coldly. Then, turning to me, "How old are you?" 19, I whispered, my throat dry. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Do you know he's married? Do you have any idea what you've done?" My father's face darkened. My mother gasped, clutching the towel to her chest. My words tangled in my throat. "I didn't know at first. He said he promised." Claire's laugh was bitter. "He always promises." The silence that followed was unbearable. My father's disappointment was worse than any yelling. My mother's tears soaked into the towel until it was damp in her hands. Finally, Claire turned and left, her heels clicking against the porch like nails in a coffin. The door closed, and the world I knew closed with it. The fallout that night. My parents sat me down in the living room. The clock ticked loudly, marking each second of their silence before my father finally spoke. "Anna," he said, his voice hard, "what were you thinking?" Tears burned my eyes. "I thought he loved me." "You're a child," my mother sobbed. "He's a grown man, a married man. He used you." I tried to defend him, to explain the promises he'd made, but every word sounded weaker than the last. "You've disgraced this family," my father said quietly. His words cut deeper than shouting ever could. "Do you understand? People will talk, they'll say things. And it's not just about you, it's about all of us." I buried my face in my hands, sobbing until my chest ached. But no amount of tears could wash away the truth. I had shattered the image of the perfect daughter, and I had dragged my family's name through the mud with me. The disappearance, I thought Daniel would fight for me, that he'd come, explain himself, prove he meant what he said. But instead, he disappeared. Days passed, then weeks. His truck no longer sat at the construction site. His phone went unanswered. His promises dissolved into nothing. And I was left with the wreckage, my parents' disappointment, my town's whispers, my own shame pressing down like a weight I couldn't shake. That was the truth I refused to see, that Daniel Hayes hadn't saved me. He had destroyed me. And the worst part was, I had let him. Chapter 4. The Firestorm. The Monday after Claire stood on our porch, the town woke up already knowing. I don't know who called whom first, whether Claire confided in a friend, or a neighbor overheard raised voices and made a few concerned phone calls, but gossip moves through a place like Willow Creek the way lightning moves through a summer storm. Fast, hot, and looking for the tallest tree to strike. That tree was my family. By noon, people were pretending not to look at us and failing. By evening, they weren't pretending anymore. The grocery aisle trial. 2 days later, my mother asked me to pick up milk. I begged her to go instead, but she was still crying into dish towels and wouldn't leave the house. I thought I could make it if I went fast, no eye contact, no small talk, just in and out. The automatic doors opened with a cheerful ding that felt cruel. The fluorescent lights hummed. I rounded the corner into the dairy aisle and almost collided with Mrs. Langley, our neighbor with binoculars for eyes. "Anna," she said brightly, as if my name tasted sweet and not like a dare. "How's your mother?" "She's fine," I muttered. "I heard." "Well." She leaned closer, lowering her voice, the way people do when they're about to raise a weapon. "It's such a shame. Such a waste. Your poor parents." I stared at the rows of milk cartons until they blurred. "Excuse me," I said, reaching. My hand shook so hard the carton slipped, burst on the linoleum, and bled a white river down the aisle. People turned. Someone clucked their tongue. A teen bagger grabbed a mop and wouldn't meet my eyes. I left without the milk. The law office my father carried humiliation differently. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He went quiet and precise, like a surgeon preparing a difficult cut. He kept going to work at Carter, Bell, his tidy brick law office on Maple Street, wearing the same gray suit, the same cautious tie. But when he came home, his jaw was always clenched. There were little crescents of skin on his palms where he dug his nails in. Clients canceled consultations to reschedule soon. A partner suggested kindly, in that polished way men like him had, that perhaps my father should take a few weeks until things blow over. As if my mistake were a storm that had wandered in from nowhere, not something I had called down on us myself. That night, he ate standing at the kitchen counter, not sitting, as if sitting would be too much like admitting we were still a family gathered for dinner. "You will not set foot near that construction site again," he said. "You will not leave this house without telling us exactly where you're going and for how long. And you will answer your mother when she speaks to you." I nodded. Shame felt like wool stuffed down my throat. He set his fork down carefully. "I have spent 20 years in this town building credibility one case at a time. Your mother has poured herself into that school for almost as long. Do you understand what you've jeopardized?" "I do," I whispered, and hated how small my voice sounded. The teacher's lounge, if my father bled in private, my mother bled in public. She taught 4th grade at Willow Creek Elementary. On her first day back after the porch, she walked into the teacher's lounge and conversations snapped shut like trap doors. Someone left a half-stirred cup of coffee and fled. Another person, braver or meaner, offered consolation wrapped in poison. "Martha, you know we all make mistakes, especially children." That afternoon, the principal called her in. "Parents are sensitive," he said, hands steepled. "Maybe you should take a short leave. For your own peace of mind." She agreed, came home, and put the kettle on. When the whistle blew, she didn't move to turn it off. The scream of steam filled the kitchen until I leapt up, jerked it from the burner, and burned my finger. She didn't apologize. She just stared at the empty corner where the calendar hung, as if she could climb inside a square labeled June and live there forever. Rachel tells the truth, only Rachel still came around. She knocked late, when the porch light had already pulled a trembling halo out of the dark, and slipped into my room without letting my mother see her. She sat cross-legged on my carpet and studied me as if she could still find the girl she used to know. "You okay?" she asked. I shrugged. "You're not," she said, "and I get it. But you don't have to pretend with me." "The worst part," I said, "is that I knew something was wrong before I knew." I liked the danger. It felt like being seen. Rachel didn't lecture me. She didn't say "I told you so." She just reached across the space between us and squeezed my hand. "Being seen by the wrong person is worse than being invisible," she said softly. "You're not a cautionary tale. You're my friend." I cried then, ugly, loud, shaking. When I finally quieted, she handed me a wad of tissues and said, "Block his number." "I've already tried." He disappeared. "Good," she said, and meant it. Claire again. A week after the first visit, Claire returned. She didn't step inside. She stood on the porch like a verdict and asked my mother if she could speak to me alone. My mother hesitated, then nodded, with a look that said, "Be braver than I was." We faced each other with the screen door between us, a mesh veil that made us both look slightly unreal. "I'm not here to hurt you," Claire said, "but I won't comfort you either." I swallowed. "I don't need comfort." "Everyone needs comfort," she said almost kindly. "That's why we do stupid things." She glanced past me, into our hallway with its family photos, the one of me in a white piano recital dress that made me look like a ghost of a better girl. "You should know he's gone," she said. "He took what was left in our checking account and left a note on the kitchen table that said, 'I need space.'" "I'm sorry," I said. and meant it so completely it surprised me. "Don't be sorry for me," she answered. "Use your sorry to build a life you can live with." She turned to leave, then paused. "He told me you were different. He always says that about the last one." The door clicked shut. The sound felt final, like a nail set flush. My parents insisted on going to church the following Sunday. It was a performance of normalcy we couldn't afford to skip. We sat, as always, in the fourth pew from the front, beneath the stained glass window where a lamb stared back with impossible forgiveness. During the hymn, my father sang too loudly. My mother didn't sing at all. After service, Pastor Reynolds shook hands with everyone in a slow line of grace. When it was our turn, he squeezed my shoulder, held my father's hand a beat longer than custom allowed, and said, "We are more than our worst choices." It should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like the needle before the stitches. Behind us, whispers rose and fell. "Poor Martha. Such a shame. That man should be in jail. Where did she learn that kind of behavior?" Shame is loud, even when it's whispered. The anonymous chorus, then, the letters started. The first was tucked under our doormat. "Repent." The second landed in our mailbox with no return address. "Keep your daughter away from our boys." The third was for my father at his office. "How can a man who can't rule his own house advise anyone else?" My father folded them in half without looking at me and slid them into a drawer. Later, I found him in his den. The letters spread out like a grim hand of cards, his fingers pressed to his temple as if he could rearrange pain into a better outcome. I took the stack and fed them one by one into the kitchen trash. Not a bonfire, just the soft burial of paper. It felt inadequate and necessary at once. The edge some afternoons I walked without direction, past houses with flags and porches, past kids chalking hopscotch onto sidewalks, past the construction site that now sat oddly quiet without Daniel's truck. I didn't go closer. I wasn't sure what I feared, more seeing him or not seeing him. On one of those walks, I ended up at the lake. The surface looked steel flat from a distance, but up close, ripples caught the light and broke it into sharp coins. I kicked off my shoes and stood knee-deep until cold numbed my shins. I wanted the water to absolve me. It didn't. But it did remind me that I was still in a body, and bodies insist on surviving. A pickup rolled into the gravel lot behind me. My heart lurched as if it recognized a ghost. But it wasn't Daniel. It was Sheriff Nolan. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, not unkindly. "Folks are riled up." He looked at me for a long moment. "You're not the first girl a man lied to," he added. "Be smart. Be gentle with your mama. And don't give this town a second show." I nodded, water lapping my calves like a soft reprimand. Rules and chores my parents tried to love me into obedience. They made rules. No phone after 10, no car without permission, no leaving town. They gave me chores I'd never been asked to do before: scrubbing the porch, weeding the flower beds, cataloging boxes in the attic. It wasn't punishment so much as a penance they could measure. I took it. I needed something to do with my hands. One afternoon, in the attic's hot dust, I found a shoebox of letters my mother and father had written each other when they were young, hopeful, ordinary promises scrawled in blue ink. "Can't wait to see you Saturday. Your father will come around soon, I swear." I saw a lamp in the window at Miller's, and it looked like the glow I feel when you walk into a room. I set the bundle back carefully, reverently, as if I were restoring a relic to its altar. I realized then what I had put at risk wasn't just our reputation. It was the language of our home, the ordinary softness my parents had built over years of small, faithful choices. The last flicker in early September, the library edition opened. There was a ribbon cutting with a brass band and paper cups of punch. I went because not going would have looked like hiding. And there's only so much hiding a life can endure. I stood at the back with Rachel, who threaded her arm through mine, and listened as the mayor thanked, The hard-working men who built this for us. No one said Daniel's name. He'd become an unwritten rule, known, unacknowledged, erased in the way only small towns and guilty hearts can manage. When the speeches ended, I slipped into the new stacks. Fresh paint. New carpet. Spines of books that hadn't yet been cracked. I pressed my palm to a blank white end cap and made myself a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I would learn how to be the kind of woman who could live with her choices and not drown in them. It didn't feel like redemption. It felt like a single match in a long night. The firestorm burned through that fall and into winter. By the time the air cooled and the leaves let go, the town had tired of the taste of my name. Scandal always needs new fuel. It moved on without apologizing. We were left to sift our ashes. Years later, when I thought I had rebuilt myself from the cinders, I would see him again across a crowded room and understand. Some fires never really go out. They just go quiet, waiting for wind. Chapter 5. Years later time doesn't heal all wounds. It just teaches you how to dress them so they don't scare people at dinner parties. By the time I turned 39, the girl from Willow Creek felt like someone I used to babysit. I lived 2 states away in a city with glass buildings and resonant. Chapter 5. Years later. Time doesn't heal all wounds. It just teaches you how to dress them so they don't scare people at dinner parties. By the time I turned 39, the girl from Willow Creek felt like someone I used to babysit. I lived 2 states away in a city with glass buildings and restaurants where the waiters knew my order. I had a job I was good at, fundraising director for a literacy nonprofit, and a husband whose steadiness could anchor ships. Michael Carter wasn't flashy or volatile. He listened. He remembered grocery lists and my mother's birthday without prompts. With him, our home felt like a room with windows on all sides, bright, aired out, honest. We had 2 children, Evan and Sadie, who left a trail of clay projects and soccer cleats through the house like breadcrumbs leading back to joy. Our weekends were a carousel of swim meets, pancake mornings, and car sing-alongs to songs we'd all pretend not to like later. It was ordinary, and that ordinariness felt like a miracle. If the past flared up now and then a scent of gasoline and summer, a neon motel sign glimpsed from a highway, I learned to breathe until it passed, like weather. Then came the gala, the night of good intentions. Our nonprofit held its annual fundraiser in the ballroom of the Fairmont Regency. All chandeliers and champagne and people who practiced their philanthropy like a second language. I wore a navy gown and a simple gold bracelet Michael had given me our first Christmas. He wore a tux that made him look like the gentlest version of James Bond. We were there to raise money for children who needed books, and that was a cause pure enough to quiet any restless ghosts. I floated from table to table with my donor smile, warm, approachable, never greedy, thanking people by name, asking about their kids, promising to send reports. Michael followed a step behind, my amplifier and soft landing, filling in details I forgot, and laughing at jokes that didn't quite deserve it. We were a team. We had practiced this dance. During the program, I stood at the podium and told a story about a second grader who learned to read with a volunteer named Mrs. Alvarez, and how the first sentence she decoded was, "I can run." The room hummed with the gentle, expensive hush. That means people are listening. I saw Michael near the back, hands folded, pride in the tilt of his chin. I felt safe. After the applause, the lights softened. The band started its sincere attempt at jazz standards, and couples drifted toward the dance floor like planets finding their orbits. I excused myself, intent on a breath of air before the thank you gauntlet resumed. The terrace doors sighed open. Cool night. City lights blinking like distant ships. I lifted my face to the breeze and let the silk of the evening slide over me. "Anna," a man said behind me, speaking my name like a password. There are words that split a life into before and after. Sometimes they're "I do" or "I'm sorry." That night, it was just my name, pronounced in a voice that folded a decade into a single second. I turned. Daniel Hayes stood 3 feet away, holding a glass of wine like a business card he hadn't decided whether to hand over. The face of a story I'd tried to forget. He hadn't kept young. He hadn't kept anything, really, except the shape of himself, the height. The crooked smile that was more practiced than I remembered. The way his eyes evaluated a room like it owed him something. His hair was grayer, his jaw rougher with the kind of stubble that isn't a style so much as a decision not to try. The years had written a different book on him than they had on me. Not gentled, but thinned. Not matured, but distilled into something harder. "Hello, Anna," he said, as if we were classmates running into each other at the grocery store, not ghosts meeting on a balcony. I gripped the railing until the metal cooled my palms. "What are you doing here?" "Came with a friend," he said, angling his head toward the ballroom. "You look good, different." "Different is the point," I said. He laughed softly. "I always liked your mouth when you were angry." Old instincts clanged inside me, the reflex to explain, to placate, to disappear into his weather. I swallowed them. "You shouldn't be here." "I didn't come for you," he lied. "But once I saw you at that microphone, I thought, that woman looks familiar." Took me a minute. "Leave me alone." I took a step toward the door. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked. "Not about me, not about us, about it." Our summer distilled into a variable he could solve for. "No," I said, and hated that the word trembled. "Not anymore." He studied my face. "You got what you wanted. A proper life. Husband, kids." He said proper the way some people say prison. "I always knew you had it in you." "Daniel," I said, keeping my voice low, "I'm asking you to walk back through that door and forget you saw me." He smiled. A slow tilt I remembered too well. "You always did like giving me orders you wanted me to break." For a second, the terrace shifted, the safe hotel, the city, the life I had built, and behind it I could see a motel room with a humming air conditioner and a girl who thought the word special meant safe. I let the vision come and go, like a wave I no longer had to drown in. "My husband is inside," I said. "He's decent. He's the kind of man who doesn't need a secret to feel alive." He shrugged. "Everybody needs something." "Then go find your something somewhere else." I turned to the door. He caught my wrist, not hard, just enough to position the past between us like a card on a table. "I never forgot you," he said. "Not once." Once, that sentence could have rewritten my sky. Now it only sounded like what a person says when he's decided nostalgia is easier than accountability. I slipped my hand free. "Good night, Daniel." I went back inside. The dance. Michael saw my face from across the room and knew something had cracked. He met me halfway, the way he always does. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" "Dance with me," I said. He didn't ask why. He led me to the center, placed one hand in my left, the other steady at my waist. We swayed to the band's earnest attempt at "The Way You Look Tonight." I pressed my cheek to his shoulder and counted my breaths. In, out. "I'm here. I'm here." "Long night," he murmured. "Long life," I said, and felt him smile into my hair without understanding the edges of it. That's the thing about good men, they don't require a footnote to every sentence. They believe the surface unless you ask them to look deeper, and even then they are gentle with what they find. On the far side of the room, through bodies and light, I caught a glimpse of Daniel at the bar. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He lifted his glass in a little salute that was equal parts acknowledgement and air. Then he vanished into the crowd. The afterimage. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside Michael, listening to the rhythm of a man who trusts the world enough to surrender to it. I tried to catalog the facts. I am not 19. I am safe. I am not a girl with borrowed time. I am a woman with a mortgage and a calendar full of piano recitals and dentist appointments. But facts don't always convince the body. Mine hummed with adrenaline, searching for exits that weren't there. In the morning, I made lunches, braided Sadie's hair, reminded Evan to bring his science project. It felt important to perform the ritual of our life. Packed backpacks by the door, the goodbye kiss, the wave from the porch as they folded themselves into the day. When the house was quiet, I stood at the sink and waited to understand what last night meant. Surely it was just a coincidence. Surely he'd go back to whatever version of drifting he now called a plan, and I would go back to mine, the two lines never crossing again. But grief and desire are both recursive. They return to their beginnings. I knew enough about stories to know this one wasn't finished. Not yet. The envelope. The envelope arrived 3 days later. No return address. My name typed on a label, not handwritten. Inside, a single glossy photo. I didn't need to look twice to know the scene. A diner 2 towns over, the summer of 1998. A girl with stubborn shoulders and a man with a lazy smile. The angle suggested a booth across the room, the way a secret prefers distance. A yellow sticky note clung to the corner. We should talk. No signature. No number. Just the old arrogance, repackaged as inevitability. I carried the photo to the kitchen trash can and hovered there for a long minute. Throwing it away felt like pretending a fire wasn't already catching. Keeping it felt like feeding that fire pages from a book I'd promised to stop reading. I slid it into a drawer instead, which is how adults throw things away slower. That night, I didn't tell Michael. How do you open a conversation like that? Hey, the man who wrecked my family when I was 19 surfaced at a gala and sent a souvenir from the wreckage. Secrets start small, with reasonable explanations attached, like tags on new clothes. I'll tell him when I understand what this island. I'll tell him when it stops feeling like a dream. I wasn't lying to him. Not yet. I was lying to the girl who thought she could manage a storm by naming the clouds. A promise rewritten. The next morning, I drove to work early. I parked 2 blocks away and watched the door from my car, the cooling system ticking like a nervous clock. No sign of him. No second envelope. Just a city resuming its choreography. Dog walkers, delivery trucks, a woman in running shoes speaking sternly to a toddler in a stroller about the ethics of throwing crackers. By noon, I had persuaded myself he'd overplayed his hand. Daniel had always specialized in entrances. He wasn't designed for longevity. At 12:17 p.m., my office phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up out of habit, donor reflex activated. Anna, he said, and it was a kindness of the universe that I was already sitting down. How did you get this number? I remember things, he said. You always use the same office line for callbacks. You like consistency. You need to stop. What if I don't? He sounded almost curious, like a man considering a new brand of cologne. What if I say I have something you should see? I'm hanging up, Daniel. You have kids, he said then. And the way he said it lightly, like a fact he'd plucked from a public record, made the room tilt. Beautiful. You must be proud. I didn't realize I'd stood until my chair scraped back. Don't talk about my family. Then meet me, he said. Same diner as before. Tomorrow. Noon. No. You should come, Anna, because if you don't, the past will. The line clicked dead. I stood very still, the way you do when the glass falls, but hasn't shattered yet. By evening, I had made a decision I would regret and defend in equal measure. I would meet him once and end this on purpose. Not because he asked. Because I was done letting my life be a place where old storms thought they could squat. I sat on the edge of our bed that night and watched Michael floss his teeth, a domestic sacrament. Everything okay? He asked through the bathroom doorway. Yes, I said, and the word tasted like metal. He nodded, unsuspicious, and started telling me about a client who had accidentally CC'd a competitor on a confidential email. I laughed in the right places. We turned off the lamps. He drifted. I watched the ceiling and set an alarm I didn't need. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would end it. The past, however, is never content with punctuation. It prefers ellipses. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The diner hadn't changed. Same chrome-edged counter with red stools. Same coffee rings tattooed into the laminate. Same sun-faded photographs of local baseball teams tacked along the back wall. Even the bell over the door sounded the same one bright note that made every head lift before looking back down at their hash browns. I arrived at 11:58 a.m. because I wanted to be the one who waited. I slid into the corner booth where the sight line gave me both the front door and the parking lot. My palms were damp. My throat tasted like the tin of a new penny. A waitress with a name tag that read Marnie poured coffee without asking. "You want a menu, honey?" "No, thanks." My voice came out softer than I meant. "Just the coffee." At 12:04, the bell chimed. I didn't need to turn to know it was him. The room shifted in that dumb way rooms do when someone walks in with a past attached. "Anna," Daniel Hayes said, as if we were picking up a conversation we'd paused during commercials. He set a file envelope on the table first, then himself. He didn't remove his sunglasses until he'd finished looking at me through them. When he did, his eyes were not the blue I remembered. They were the gray of road salt. "You look tired," he said. "You look like a man who sends mail he can't sign," I answered. Marnie appeared, refilled my cup, and glanced at him like waitresses do, half inventory, half mercy. "You want anything?" "Burger. Medium. Fries." He smiled at her. It was the kind of smile you practice in a mirror. "Thanks, Marnie." When she was gone, he touched the envelope with 2 fingers, as if stroking a pet. "You got my photo." "Yes." "And you kept it?" "Briefly." He grinned, pleased with how well he knew the shape of my old choices. "You were always sentimental, even when you pretended you weren't." "Why am I here, Daniel?" "Because I asked," he said lightly. "Because you're a decent person. Because you don't like variables roaming loose. Say what you came to say." He studied me for a few seconds, as if testing which version of me was currently in the room. Then, he slid the envelope toward me. "I've been thinking about that summer. About the consequences. About closure." "Closure for who?" "For everyone," he said. "You. Me. My family. Your family. My family doesn't need you to close anything." He shrugged. "Maybe not. But they might need the truth." "The truth?" I could feel the tremor of my laugh. "You don't own the truth, Daniel. You rent it by the hour." He drummed a rhythm on the table with his knuckles. "Open it." I didn't move. He opened it for me, like a consultant who has stopped pretending you'll read the slide deck. He spread 3 items across the formica. Another photo of the diner from 1998. A second photo from a different night me stepping out of his truck, his hand on the small of my back, and a thin stack of photocopied receipts from the Lakeside Motel. "Souvenirs?" I asked. "Proof," he corrected. "Of a pattern." "Of your predation," I said. "On a teenager." He tilted his head, as if the word felt new in his mouth. "You weren't a child. You were, you." "Which was 19, I said. "You were 25 and married." "Semantics," he murmured. I leaned forward, controlled and cold. "You sent me pictures of me at 19 and called them proof. What do you want?" "Money," he said, so simply that I blinked. There it was. Not poetry, not an apology wrapped in anecdote, not some delusional speech about fate, just commerce. He smiled at my silence. "You work for a nonprofit. Your husband's doing well at Carter Bell, last I checked. Nice house in Ridgefield Heights. Prius and a Subaru. Kids at Edison Charter. Tuition's not cheap. My breath left me like a punctured tire. You've been watching us. Nothing invasive, he lied with a shrug. Public records. Social media. A few conversations with people who like to talk. The world hands you what you want if you look like you already own it. Stop saying you're not invasive, I said. You're a crowbar. He laughed, genuinely this time. I missed your lines. I looked at the photos again, not images, but blades. I thought of Michael's easy smile in the kitchen, the way Sadie chewed the end of her braid when she read, the arch Evan made with his eyebrows when he was about to argue a physics point. I saw shock traveling through our home like a short circuit. Shame is a contagion, and men like Daniel know how to aerosolize it. How much? I asked, swallowing the bile. He named a number that could put a dent in a college fund. Not ruinous, strategic. A price designed to feel like a reasonable tax on silence. And if I pay? I go away, he said. I delete everything. I stop mailing nostalgia to your kitchen. I let the past be where it belongs. He said it like a man offering to turn down a radio. And if I don't? He lifted a shoulder. Then I share. With whoever deserves to know. Your husband might be interested in your formative years. You're bored, too. Donors. They love a redemption narrative, but only the kind they control. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Marnie slide his plate onto the table. He picked up a fry, bit it in half, and examined the cross-section like a scientist. He was always good at eating in the middle of fires. I could call the police, I said. For what? He wiped his fingers on a napkin. Blackmail is such an ugly word. It's the right word. He nodded, as if conceding a point on a debate team. Maybe. But it's not your best move. These pictures won't get me arrested, but they'll hurt you. Not legally, socially, emotionally. Families are systems. You pull one wire, the whole circuit lights up. Why? I asked, honestly. Suddenly, the way a person asks a doctor to lean closer. Why do this now? It's been 20 years. He chewed, swallowed. Because the credit ran out, he said. And for once, he wasn't performing. Because life didn't go the way it should have. Because I looked you up one day, and there you were, on a stage with a spotlight and a microphone like you'd never paid for anything. Because you got out clean. I didn't, I said, so quietly the words almost didn't exist. I lived with a war in my house for a long time because of you. Then you understand, he said, brightening. Help me and Mina. I realized, with a clarity that felt like cold air, that he believed this was negotiation between equals. He had recast our history as a sequence of informed consents. He had reauthored my memory into a ledger. What's the deadline? I asked. Noon Friday, he said. Cashier's check. Text me when you have it. I don't have your number. He slid a card across the table. No name. Just 10 digits and a generic email. And one more thing, he added, like the waiter offering dessert. He reached into the envelope, pulled out a fourth photo, and placed it on top. It wasn't from 1998. It was recent. A teenage boy stood on a baseball diamond, hat backward, sunlight slanting across his cheekbones. He looked maybe 17. The shock wasn't his age. It was his face. There was something in the line of his mouth, the angle of his jaw, some haunting echo that felt like a bell struck inside my ribs. His name is Noah, Daniel said softly. He's mine. I didn't speak. He could be yours, he added. And now the smile was gone. Do the math. I did. Not the math he wanted, the rough arithmetic of summer and birthdays. I calculated probabilities of cruelty, of opportunism. I calculated how many ways a lie can wear a Letterman jacket and look like it belongs in your family room. What are you saying? I asked, because he wanted me to ask. That I kept something from you, he said. Back then. There was a situation after you left for school. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you. He let the gallantry sit on the table like a rose he'd stolen from someone else's garden. But you have a right to know. Noah deserves to know. He asks about his mother sometimes. My God, I whispered. You are unbelievable. You can test it, he said, lifting his water glass. If you want. But either way, it changes the picture, doesn't it? Your husband, your kids. The way your life is arranged like a nice dining room plates in the right cabinets. Glasses sparkling. Suddenly there's a new chair at the table. You're lying, I said. But the word didn't sound like armor. It sounded like a prayer. My hand drifted toward the photo and stopped. Touching it felt like contamination. He checked his watch, performed boredom. Noon Friday, he repeated. Then we can talk about everything. He stood, slid the sunglasses back on, and put 2 20s under his untouched burger as if he were leaving a tip for the past. For what it's worth, he said, you look better than I expected. Go to hell, I said. Already been, he answered lightly. It's under new management. He walked out. The bell sang. The light he let in when he opened the door took a second to close behind him. Marnie drifted back, eyeing the wreckage on the table, the pictures, the grease cooling on the fries. My coffee gone cold. You want a box? She asked, then seemed to hear her own words. For the burger, I mean. No, I said. Thank you. You all right? No, I said again. But I will be. She gave a single nod that said she believed me, or that believing me cost her nothing. I slid the photos back into the envelope and walked to the register. I paid in cash. Outside, the sky had turned the dull color of an old bruise. A truck downshifted at the light and growled away. I sat in my car with the engine off and let the quiet press in until it stopped being a threat. On the drive home, a plan assembled itself with the mechanical grace of a drawbridge lowering. I would not negotiate with a man who mistook shame for currency. I would not let him auction my peace to the highest gossip. If there was any truth buried in his last lie, I would exhume it myself. When I turned onto our street, the house looked exactly as it always did at 2 in the afternoon, calm, well-watered, innocent. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the envelope, and then I did the first smart thing I'd done since the gala. I picked up my phone and called a lawyer I knew through work. Alyssa Grant, sharp, discreet, unflappable. Alyssa, I said when she picked up, I need to discuss a potential extortion matter, and I need a referral for a private investigator. Also, I may need a lab that does private DNA testing. I could hear her posture change across the line. Come by at 5. We'll take this step by step. When I hung up, I looked at the framed photos on the mantel, Michael in a goofy holiday sweater, Evan at his science fair, Sadie missing her front teeth. My family did not look breakable, but neither did I once, and I had learned the hard way how quickly a story can change tense. I tucked the envelope into the back of the pantry, behind the mixer I never used. Secrets, I'd learned, prefer company among appliances. Then I texted Rachel, "Are you free tonight? I need you to tell me I'm not crazy." Her reply came in under a minute. "I'll be there at 6. I'll bring Ty." And fury. For the first time all day, I smiled. Not relief. Recognition. The past was here, yes. But so were the people who had already pulled me through one firestorm. If Daniel thought he could oxygenate my life with threats, he didn't understand what happens when you put flame to steel. I set the table for 4, like any other night. I boiled pasta for the kids, poured olive oil into the pan, and listened to the familiar sounds of our house reset the rhythm of my bones. Over the sizzle, I said to the empty room, "Noon Friday," as if it were a dare I intended to win. Outside, clouds gathered. The forecast promised rain. Let it come. I had umbrellas now.